Free Spirit, what if your career blocks aren't just mindset, but energy? Welcome back to Flying Upstream, the podcast for bold souls making brave moves. In today's episode, we're diving into the unseen forces that can hold us back, negative souls, energy vampires, and how to protect your path. We're joined by two incredible women, each bringing a powerful lens to clearing energy and claiming your next chapter. Let's meet them.
Our first guest today is Gina Marie. She's the creator of the Colorful Clearing Method, a transformative healing experience that weaves together sound healing, breath work, movement, and meditation to support women in releasing emotional imprints and reclaiming their inner vibrancy. With a background in pranic healing and a deeply personal journey through loss and trauma, Gina brings a grounded, empowering perspective on sound as a sacred tool for emotional regulation, nervous system healing, and conscious transformation. Her work invites others, especially women in midlife, to use frequency as a daily ritual for returning to joy, balance, and wholeness. Welcome to Flying Upstream, Gina.
Thanks to be nice to be here.
Wonderful. And our next guest is Melanie, a true spiritual pilgrim, a lifelong student of spirit. Melanie began studying tarot at just 12 years old and has been walking a path of deep esoteric exploration ever since. Certified in spiritual realignment and working as an Akashic Records reader, she brings powerful insight, wisdom, and intuition to her work. Her journey has been anything but conventional, guided by her inner truth rather than external expectations. With a lifetime of spiritual seeking behind her and a heart still wide open to learning, Melanie is here to share her unique light with us today. Melanie, welcome to Flying Upstream.
Thank you so much. I feel so very welcomed here. Thank you.
I'm glad. I'm glad. Awesome. Let's get right into it.
Okay, to start us off, I'd love to hear from each of you. In your own words, how would you define a negative soul or an energy vampire, and are they the same thing? Let's start with Melanie.
Okay. Um, so, in the modality that I'm certified in, soul realignment, we actually specifically address the concept of negative souls. And I actually think it's probably the best definition for me in my lived experience. It's essentially people who, through choice and action, no longer receive their own vital force through their internal mechanisms. They receive it through their relationships with other people, the attention that they receive from other people. I like to think of them as like my empty cup people. There's just this consistent feeling of empty cup. Um, and so negative souls aren't negative as in a moral sense, but it's more like there's a detractive element to their spiritual makeup, or at least the way they're mechanistically designed. Whereas an energy vampire is nuanced and different. To me, to be an energy vampire, there is a level of consciousness around that. It's typically, in my experience, someone who consciously draws energy from other people, spaces, places, or objects, and there's a very extractive nature, and there can sometimes be a unconscious predatory instinct around the energy vampire. And again, there can actually be a level of consent involved with an energy vampire. With negative souls, there tends to be more of a unconscious element to their behavior. So yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, Melanie. Gina, what would you like to add to that?
So, I definitely have more experience, I would say, with the energy vampire terminology. And I think that's just from being such an empath and feeling other people's emotions very deeply and sensitively since I was a young child. And for years, I didn't know that other people's energy could affect us as deeply, and that it does. So I feel like energy vampires, it's I don't know if they're always conscious of what they do. I think a lot of people in general are so wrapped up in their own world, their own emotions, their own trauma, their own pain. And then all they are doing is processing from their own limited experiences, beliefs, perceptions, and therefore they can't help but omit this frequency of, the negativity, the being over dramatic, and then that in turn, when it enters the space of someone that may not naturally have a base level like that, I feel that that's when we feel that suction happen. And people that have I see a baseline of peace, a baseline of love, a baseline of joy, can be really susceptible to attracting the energy vampire because we almost transmute their negative energy for them, which is why we sometimes feel so drained after they leave us. So it's one of those things where I don't even know if they know what's happening. We don't even always know what's happening, but we feel it and we sense it. Now, a negative soul, and this is going to be just from my personal beliefs and opinions. I believe everybody is born with a pure soul. I believe we all have pure souls and we're all perfection when we come in. Unfortunately, though, life and our circumstances can bring so much negative, you know, influence that we can often, I believe, lose touch with that positive soul, right? And are sometimes the negative soul kind of takes its place. I've saw that firsthand in my brother who struggled with addiction for 25 years. I literally saw a darker presence take his body, and I almost talked to two different people at times. So I feel that's my interpretation with a darker soul, a negative soul. I don't really know how much power or control everyone has on it, but they are there, they're in existence, and, learning how to handle and protect ourselves and deal with them on a daily basis is very crucial.
So, follow-up question to this. Um, Now that we understand what these the negative souls and the energy vampires are, how would you know if you're around one? Like, let's just say you're going about your day, you're in an office, or you're with your family, or a networking event. How do you know? Like, there are plenty of people that I don't like. That doesn't mean they're all energy vampires or negative souls, right? So, how would one kind of tune into that? Either one of you can
So,
jump in.
Go
Yeah.
ahead, Bill.
uh, Gina, do you want to go first?
Okay, I can go first. So for me, it's very easy to tell. I think that's because of the sensitivity that I have towards it. So to me, I can have my back turned towards somebody, and when they walk into the room, I'm like, oh, geez, I could feel it, right? And I'm like, oh, this person's but if you aren't that sensitive, I think there's definitely key, I don't know, attributes that you can sense. Someone who tends to not let you get a word in edgewise. Someone who is constantly, shifting the conversation back to them. Doesn't really have an empathetic nature towards you. So they're not acknowledging what you're saying, they're not hearing you, and they're just kind of caught up, and they tend to amplify or, really exaggerate what's going on. So even though there might be a negative situation, to them the world is ending, right? And you can sense these things. So I think it's just their over dramatic kind of outpouring of their emotions and their verbiage and how they communicate with us. As far as a darker soul, I think that is something that is more, that takes a little more time. I don't feel that you can identify that right away to me, um, because I don't feel a lot of people walk around and let that side of them be known right away either. So we tend to have to kind of have a little bit of a guard up in how we interpret people. But I think the biggest lesson for anyone to take away from all of this is listen to your internal meter, listen to your intuition, and whatever read you are getting from that person, just trust it and go with it. And then, walk forward with protecting yourself as best you can.
That's really good. I feel like we are only a few minutes into this and I'm already learning a lot.
Same.
It's really
Yeah.
amazing. I want to kind of make a little bit of a shift here. So, within the same scope of that, I'm always wondering when we work with people, right? When we work in an office, or even like those of us who may work virtually, how do you know in those environments? You've shared some really good tips, Gina, but like in those environments, how can you make sure that you're not letting these negative souls and these energy vampires sort of suck something out of you that holds you back from being able to make whatever decisions or whatever career changes, growth you want to make? And I bring up the work environment because I feel like it's such a tricky one, right? Because it's a lot easier to, like, if somebody's in your home, or if you're in somebody else's home, or if you're in a public place, you can kind of get up and leave. But if you're stuck with these people, what can you sort of do to make sure they're not getting in the way of your own career path?
So I'd actually like to speak to this because I have some real lived experience around this. I have at different times in my life worked in different positions, and in one previous job, the literal location, like the location of the place, was very dense, um, kind of like seeped in sorrow is the best way I could explain that space. And it had to do a lot with what I knew about the history of that location and the events that had happened there. And so when you are in an environment, especially if there's a lot of just history of negative, dense energy, or even if the people themselves have heavy loads that they're carrying, I am a big fan of the violet flame. I work with the violet flame. The violet flame is a energy that naturally purifies, transmutes, and transforms, and always works under the law of grace, like for the highest good of all involved. It kind of like bypasses the egoic need to be right, and essentially then right for everyone in a way that honors their path, their purpose and journey, but also kind of like establishes a real energetic boundary around yourself. Like, I can exist in a space with someone who is carrying heavy energy or has some major difficulties they're going through without taking that on. Like, that's not our jobs. Our jobs is to, for me, at least for me, to hold the space, to hold a resonance, to hold an invitation to healing. And the violet flame is my favorite tool because I literally just need my will and attention, and that's all you need. And you can add crystals and other stuff to it, and there's like a whole process you can do, but at the very end of the day, working with this energy that's based on the celestial and higher realms, and aligned to the incoming golden age of Aquarius. I mean, it's exciting and it's convenient too. It's like Windex for bad vibes, you know? So,
I love
So for
that.
me, um, spending a lot of time around, I'm a hairstylist, and in the salon, you can get a lot of negative clients or energy vampires. And so over the years, and even in a regular corporate environment, these types of tools and techniques work too. It is learning how to keep your own space kind of sacred and creating almost a bubble around yourself. I jokingly referred to it as my pink bubble for a lot of years, and it's just one of my favorite colors. And so I started to almost train the other people in a joking way that oh, if I'm around a conversation that might be draining for me, and for me that's politics. I'm just going to be completely, I don't get into that. My family has one over here, one over here, and so in order to protect my energy and space around conversations like that were draining to me, I would joke and say, "Oh, my bubble's starting to turn brown. You're going to make, if it turns brown, I'm leaving. So if you want me here, I'll be here if as long as we can keep." And it ended up being a joke, but sure enough, a few years later, there's the conversations don't happen anymore because I almost kind of trained the other people around me to not. Now, that might be a little bit easier said than done in a work environment, but in a work environment, I would say have coping mechanisms and tools to get yourself away from the situation. Conversation, things that you can end quickly. For me, if I'm on the phone with somebody like that, I use oh, the water's boiling on the stove. Oh, there's someone at the door. I have a list of my boundary little, you know, phrases that I use to get myself out, because at the end of the day, we allow that energy to be sucked from us. We're an element of that. So setting the intention that we're not going to do that. And then I imagine a lot of office spaces have somewhere for you to go outside. If you can get out into nature after a very stressful meeting, after an encounter with one of the, you know, people that suck your energy the most at work, and you can go and just disconnect from that space, come back refreshed, shut the office door, keep your office space sacred if that's, from somebody coming in or when they leave, having a little, cutting a cord. We all have energetic cords. So there's so many things that you can do to protect your own energy space. So hopefully that helps some people in the work environment.
That is helpful. That is helpful. I like especially what you said about trying to find some nature. And I used to work in one of these office buildings that was 30, 40 stories tall and not a lot of nature on the 32nd floor. But with that said, there was usually something I felt like I could get to, a plant on my desk or somebody's desk, or something in the realm that I could just get a little glimmer, even sitting by the window to look outside at a tree on the sidewalk, just something, even though it was pretty small. That would always help me try to remind myself that I can try to recenter, as you said, disconnect, come back to my just baseline and try to carry on with my day. So I certainly appreciate that. And I want to talk about or touch on something here that around career blocks. And we often think of career blocks as external, right? It's somebody else is blocking me, or the company isn't letting me get promoted, or they won't give me training, whatever that is, outside of us. But how can negative energy or even the presence of these negative souls contribute to things like stagnation, burnout, missed opportunities in your career or your business journey? And do you have any examples of where clearing that energy has led to major shifts?
So I so hmm, so our intention really informs our experience. Our mindset influences the perception of how we look and experience the difficulties that present themselves. So to me, when I find myself and have found myself in situations where I maybe had a teammate that was distracting or kind of not interested in letting me do my job to get towards my success, I I often start with myself first. I change my energy first. I start with, okay, how am I signaling that this is acceptable behavior? Because I can't control anyone else. I can only control me, right? So how am I signaling that this is acceptable behavior? What do I need to do to change it? And I'm all about like throwing the kitchen sink at things, like, because I'm not interested in I want things to get fixed fast. I am moderately impatient, and I own that. So if I need something to get corrected, especially in the workplace in regards to relationships, people not providing me the necessary resources to do my job, and it's something that I've documented and asked multiple times over, Well, then I'm going to start putting some violet flame in that. I'm going to start bringing in some energies and some clearance because, you know, it may not even necessarily be about me and that person in that moment. It could be part of some bigger planetary transit that's just bringing up these patterns of resistance and stagnation. And maybe in that moment, I can change myself and offer that person the impact of my field and invite them into their own change too. So that's kind of how I deal with that and have had to deal with that in the past. And it's not always comfortable or convenient, um, but it's always worth it.
I liked what Melanie said with, having to kind of take your own ownership for it. And especially with goals or our future visions, the things that we see for ourselves, it sometimes isn't difficult to envision or see what we want for our highest future selves. However, it becomes difficult to maintain the clarity around it when the opinions and the influences of others infringe on that purity of the vision that we have. And I know throughout my life as a dreamer, always I have very clear vision, always have, but there are lots of people in my inner circle and path who don't necessarily understand my vision, don't understand my drive, don't understand a lot of the things that have to do with my business and what I believe and all of that. And the biggest lesson and takeaway I think I've learned from all of that is it's okay for them not to understand. It's okay for them to have their own opinions as long as I don't let their energy. I almost imagine those people as a cyclone, and that's their storm, not mine. That's they're in their own vortex of energy over there, and they can wreak havoc anywhere they want as long as I can keep committed to my path and on. Now, does that take some resetting? A lot, yes. Because when you have an interaction with somebody, they can bring you down a few pegs, and it's not fun. That's when doubt comes in. That's when fear creeps in. And that's where, Kristyn was saying with the blocks, that can be a block if you let their opinions and influence create the energetic block. Then you're not going to get over it if you allow it to stay in your path. So that's where it does sometimes take, some reshifting, some intentional clearing, some intentional energy work, like Melanie has said, some intention behind I am not letting anyone deter me from XYZ because it's important to me because of this. And I'm pressing forward no matter what. And you almost have to have those blinders on to those people around you and just become even more protective of your vision.
That's quite interesting, and it's really excuse me, really important. I love what both of you said is that intention. It's like the intention is so important, and I feel like it's so important in many aspects of our lives. But I think we have, in general, kind of lost sight that that's also true in the workplace, that that's also true whenever we decide, what dreams we're going to pursue, whenever we decide to make a career shift, whenever we decide to start our own business, we need to set that intention behind it too. And it is also like our responsibility. We do have to hold that tight and not allow all those other energies to kind of have a say in what we're living. Like who gets to decide that? That's us. And that talks to me a little bit the way that you both said it about like resilience. And I want to touch on this. Like, how can, so we're having this conversation here today. I've already learned a lot. So I know anyone watching or listening is going to learn a lot. How can, now that we have the understanding of, what a negative soul is or in what an energy vampire is, how can we feel more empowered rather than afraid, especially when we're leaping into the unknown, whether that's starting a new career or starting our own business.
Do you want to take it? I can. It doesn't matter. um, okay, so feeling empowered is, I believe, one of those things you have to figure out what makes you feel the emotion of empowered, right? So it's not something I feel like you can make the switch just turn on to be empowered to keep going, but find the things that do give you that inspiration so that it helps lift your frequency so high that even if you are around some of these people, because the more you do energetic work and the more you master your own vibrational energy state and frequency, the less these people can affect you, to the point where you can get to a point where you're not triggered very much anymore by anyone else. And so that's really a testament to energy work, to meditation, to mindfulness, to mastering your emotions and learning that, you are the soul, you are, in control of your thoughts, body, and, your emotions at all times. And so when you master that, I believe that's when true empowerment, comes in, and it just makes all of the navigating through life easier, especially when dealing with people that tend to want to knock you down a few pegs. And when you show up in life like that, personally, I think you attract more energy vampires, and you're going to attract more of because they're threatened by you. They're threatened. A lot of people, some people feel comfort in your presence and you are helping them, but there's, an exchange there. You're helping them feel better, but most of the time they're not really giving the same to you, right? So that's where protecting that comes in. But yeah, I think you can absolutely become more empowered the more you work on mindfulness and mastering, your own emotions.
I would like to add something because Gina, you just said that really beautifully. Because what I heard was that resilience is a muscle, and like any other gym day, you gotta work that muscle. And it's like a couple years ago, my first podcast ever, my employer wanted to talk to me about resilience. He was a sports psychologist, and I worked in his office. And he's like, "Yeah, girl, let's just talk about resiliency and stuff like that." And I'm like, "You sure I'm the person we want to be talking to?" And like I feel like fear shows up in so many different places, and it's like fear can be such a liar, but also fear to me has become, okay, this is a signal. Like, in what way is fear highlighting this experience as an opportunity to extract the lesson, to extract the goal, to alchemize fear into motivation, into clarity, into wisdom, into trust? And you know discernment is so important. Virgo South Node, for anybody who's astrology oriented. So discernment is like one of the big gifts of that energy. And it's like we live in a really complex, nuanced world. And I often feel that when fear is coming up for us, it is an opportunity to engage with some really good self-inquiry. And like when we have relationships with people that trigger the ever loving fear out of us, like, what are we getting out of that? Like, what's going on? Like, step back, take a knee if you must, and just breathe, friend, breathe, because, like, even when we're afraid, it's to me one way our soul is just inviting us more into our truth. And so, yeah, I love that. Resiliency as a muscle. Beautifully said.
I agree, that is beautiful. And we have one more question around this, and perhaps even creating some of that resiliency as we begin to wind down and wrap up here. What are some simple daily practices, either spiritual or energetic, that our listeners can start today to practice their energy, regulate emotions, and stay connected to their higher purpose in everyday life, or even in during big life or career changes? Let's start with you, Gina.
So one of the things that is a daily practice for me is the practice of cutting energetic cords, and I really didn't know what those were even 5 years ago. But when it was explained to me, it made a lot of sense. So I've kind of adopted a new explanation. So I explain it as if you're watching the movie Spider-Man and he shoots a web and the web is sticking wherever he wants it. Everyone walking around, even through video and through camera and through, there's energetic cords everywhere, and they are being kind of thrown at us. The good ones, the bad ones, they're just all sticking to us. And most people walk around every day with thousands, hundreds. Like we're if we're in a crowd, a concert, a mall, a shopping, so it doesn't matter. We're walking around with that. And at the end of every night before I go to bed, I just imagine that I have kind of I into sci-fi, so I imagine that there's like lightsabers on my hands, and they're just energetic lightsabers. You can do swords, you can do whatever you want. And I just kind of cross my arms and I just say cut, disconnect, and I just kind of go all over my body, and I imagine with my mind those webs that are just they're just falling away. And that one little activity alone at night makes me feel lighter, because it's kind of I've intentionally now, if there's an energy vampire and I've just left their presence, I will cut a cord in a car. I don't care. My kids will watch me and they already know what I'm doing. Like if I'm around somebody that I know is extra heavy, I will pull that out. I taught my kids how to do it. It's intentionally saying I don't want their energy around me anymore, and I'm deciding that it can go back to them. And that's just, we have those energetic bubbles around us that unfortunately, if someone gets too close, or if someone is negatively putting something on you, you're going to feel it. So this is a way to kind of cleanse that off. And then another thing is, it is like the shielding, some sort of intentional saying, I'm just going to create this little bubble around me before I go talk to this person. Because if that person I know affects me in a certain way, I'm going into the conversation armed. I'm going in prepared, and I'm saying, you know what, I'd like, and I just intentionally ask for it. Shield me from their negative energy for the next 30 minutes, the next, hour, the next day. And so just having the little bit of intention around your own energy throughout the day. And the last thing I like to do is I am always conscious of what I'm bringing into my house to the people that I love. So I like to take a few minutes, whether it's before I'm walking in the door or in the car before I come in. And whether it's a song, whether it's a 5-minute meditation, whether it's just closing my eyes and breathing for a few minutes, it's saying, I want to leave work, or I want to leave the stress there, and I want to enter my home with the loving, full presence that everyone in my environment deserves to get from me. And just those little things during the day, I think, can make a massive shift in our energy. And also, when we shift our energy, the people around us will shift theirs. So it's contagious, and you're going to start to see people interacting with you differently when you do that.
Um, Love that. Energy shifting other energy. I love that. Um, so for me, easy, quick practices. Favorite thing to do in the morning, and I love a good shower. I love a hot, scalding shower. Um, when I take a shower, water is such a conducive element to soothing the emotional body. And for me, I'm a deeply feeling person, so I often visualize violet water pouring over me, like seeping into the achy parts of my muscles because I slept funny and maybe I'm holding tension there. So, like, I always start working with the violet flame because it naturally purifies and consecrates and alchemizes energy into a higher frequency of love and truth. Big thing. So, I'm a big fan of the violet flame, setting it before me throughout the entirety of my day, into every conversation, space, or place I enter. Because what I'm doing is I'm setting the intention not only for myself, but for the environment I'll be moving into. And then, I'm a big believer in calling in our spirit guides because we're all born with spirit guides. Like, we're all born with a whole like spiritual army at our back. These beings love us. They want to help us. So let's call in the fam. Like, let's call in our spiritual family. Like, why the hell not? So, yeah, and also, big thing, deep breaths, like deep chest, deep belly breaths, because for me, if I'm not breathing deeply, I am not thinking clearly. And we can't really make good choices if we're not clearly thinking. So, yeah, that's where I'm at.
I love that.
Thank you both. Those are all really helpful tips that I feel like I could even do just day to day. And I so appreciate that, especially Gina mentioning that you're including your kids in this too and helping them not only normalize what they're seeing you do, but even passing on some of these techniques to them as well. I love that. All right. Well, thank you both for being here today. And for our free spirits, if today's episode lit something up in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone flying upstream alongside you.
That's right. And if you're ready to protect your energy and align with your purpose, make sure that you check out the links in the show notes where you will find Gina Marie's and Melanie's information so that they can help you never miss a beat and make sure that your goals and dreams are coming true.
And free spirits, keep questioning, keep exploring, and most of all, keep flying upstream. Until next time.